Hi, good evening. As my bio states, I grew up in the Bahamas. My name is CJ. And I want to mention this because of that. This past Sunday, our country and the Bahamian people lost a great leader and a great teacher, Dr. Miles Monroe. He and his wife, along with all 7 others on board, crashed, and they were on their way to a conference in Grand Bahama. His teachings often centered around purpose, and they offered me life-changing guidance. And rather coincidentally or not, before the crash, when I emailed Cara my excerpt, it actually is about purpose. And one of the greatest quotes that he had was, "The greatest tragedy in life is not death, but life without a reason." My excerpt today is entitled "Purpose Collides with Destiny," and it is taken from an article I wrote during the Ronald McDonald House of Memphis Radiothon that occurred on October 28th and 29th of this year. And it is about the DJs who've made it their life's purpose to be part of this radiothon and make sure it continues here in Memphis. Purpose collides with destiny. Immediately after I explained that I'd like to know more about their roles with the Radiothon, Chris and Danny defer me to Bev, co-founder of the Radiothon and the one who's been with it longest. There is no hesitation as she leans slightly forward, looks me directly in the eyes and says, "I know, if for nothing else, that these 2 days are part of my purpose." And she's referring to the 2 days carved out each year for the Ronald McDonald House of Memphis Radiothon. Her tears have welled up in eyes filled with conviction. And Chris and Danny chime in and begin to share with me some of the history behind this annual fundraiser that is Ronald McDonald House's biggest of the year. I learned that Bev and Chris started on this a long time ago with John Bad Dog McCormick, the well-known Memphis radio personality who was one of Ronald McDonald House's greatest supporters and who sadly lost his battle with leukemia in 2011. The path to purpose is not linear. At one point on their journey, they all ended up at different radio stations, and for a short time were not directly involved with the Radiothon. But destiny is predetermined. In 2012, Bev, Chris, and Danny were again under the same radio station roof, now working with Cumulus Media. They picked up right where they left off. "This show was meant to be with us," exclaims Bev. Chris shares that Danny met John when she was a high school senior and he visited the school for career day. He asked her what she was going to do when she grew up, and she replied, "Take your job." Danny didn't quite take John's job, but she came pretty close to fulfilling her prophecy after leaving Memphis for California, then leaving California to return to Memphis, becoming an intern at the radio station, and finally becoming the 3rd member of the 3-person team at the helm of the annual Radiothon. We begin to talk about John. They reiterate things I've read about him, his dedication, giving spirit, and infectious humor. Bev picks up her phone, fiddles with it a bit, and places it in the center of the table. A voice is singing a riff with which I'm initially unfamiliar, but as soon as she explains who and what it is, I realize it actually is familiar. John is singing the melody of the theme song to Bonanza. It is a routine he and Bev established once he began spending more time in the hospital. When he wanted her to visit, he would call her. She never answered. Instead, Bev waited to listen to his voicemail and then made her way to the hospital, arriving in time for the 2 of them to watch Bonanza together. We sit around the conference table and listen to the entire Bonanza theme song, sung only the way John could sing it. Bev smiles, I wipe my eyes. Some of the most beautiful and most poignant memories of their lives are forever wrapped up in an old favorite Western series. I don't understand why it had to be cancer, Chris ponders aloud. He leans back in his chair, clasps his hands behind his head, and continues to wonder aloud about why the very illness John worked so hard against was the one that would also take his life. There are no concrete answers, yet I feel deep down that in some way it may have to do with certainty and purpose that Bev spoke of earlier, based on a quote of John's I came across during my research. He asked that it be posted after his death. I quote, "I have gone to be with God, and he is holding me tightly, and I am surrounded by some of the kids from the Ronald McDonald House. Do not say that you have lost a friend. One is only lost when you do not know where they are. You know where I am." I contemplate aloud that maybe John had to in some ways experience what these kids at the Ronald McDonald House experienced, so that when they met up again, there'd be a deeper, truer understanding of their journey. He moved from a place of sympathy to a position of empathy. I imagine when he saw some of those kids that the embrace was a little tighter, the smiles a bit brighter, and the laughter a little louder, because they knew that he now truly understood what they had gone through. John transitioned from a pursuit of purpose to a fulfillment of purpose. And though it was painful, I believe in many ways most necessary to his destiny. We all learned something new that morning. Chris reveals for the first time publicly that he was born with hydrocephalus. Hydrocephalus is a brain condition in which the cerebral spinal fluid is unable to drain from the brain, causing a backup of fluid in the skull. He underwent a shunt procedure, which involves surgically implanting one end of a catheter into a ventricle of the brain. Chris points to the place on his skull where the shunt is implanted, or was implanted rather. And he is usually able to see the shunt placement in many of the children with whom he works during the annual radiothon. A puzzled look washes over his face. Wow, I can't believe I never shared that before. I can, because it ties right into his purpose of being part of the largest annual fundraiser for a charity whose mission is to provide housing for sick children and their families. It was not a coincidence that Chris underwent surgery as a child, or John experienced a painful battle with leukemia. It isn't by chance that Bev's convictions are so strong, or that Danny unknowingly foresaw in high school that she would one day be part of the radio station. These lives were all destined to intertwine, and then intertwine with the children's lives of the Ronald McDonald House. According to author and sociologist Dr. Bertice Berry, when you walk with purpose, you collide with destiny. Because they all had the courage to embrace their purpose, these 4 lives did just that, collided with destiny.